along to The Assist, sponsored by Free Super Tips. I'm Warren Ashurst, and joining me for this Champions League semi-final special are Liam Flin and James Milton. We have two previous winners, of course, of the Champions League, still in the last four, and two teams looking for a first European Cup remaining in the competition. And we've got the first legs to look forward to in midweek. We'll get to the games themselves in a bit, but let's firstly look at the outright and top goal scorer odds. And we'll start off with looking at the outright odds. Now we've reached the last four. Barcelona, not surprisingly really, are 2-1 favourites to go on and lift the trophy. PSG 9-4, Arsenal 5-2, and Inter Milan 9-2. James, a quick word from you on terms of those outright odds. Is it probably a fair reflection that Barcelona are the strong favourites?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's obviously heavily influenced by the draw, and that PSG Arsenal tie that we're going to come onto in a moment. It just looks so tight, and Barcelona are seen as having the easier semi-final against Inter. I think probably even after Inter qualified from the quarterfinals, you'd have looked at their price outright and thought, is that a bit big? But they've hit a real flat spot since then. And that should play into Barcelona's hands. The concern over Barca is with this expansive style of play, are they going to get caught out, or will they just go all the way, kind of believing that they can outscore their opponents, whatever happens. But yeah, I think Barca, given Inter's recent struggles, are worthy favourites at the moment.
Liam, Milt's mentioned there in terms of Inter's form in the league. Is league performances something that you have to seriously consider going into this? I mean, look at PSG. They've lost a couple of games recently, but of course the title's already wrapped up in France.
Yeah, I definitely think it is, because at the end of the day, it's a defeat's a defeat, and it's going to have an impact on the morale of that team. And I know a lot of people will say, well, PSG have already wrapped up the title, but they were looking to, go unbeaten for the entire season. They've obviously lost that now. They lost to Nice, so there was certainly the stakes were still high for them in those league games. I definitely think Inter, for me, that is really put off by them, by their current form. I think it is exciting because there are cases that can be made for all four semi-finalists. I mean, Barca are arguably the best attacking team on the planet. PSG have looked so cohesive and pulled off some really big wins. Arsenal were excellent over both legs against Real Madrid, and Inter have typically been a tough nut to crack throughout this competition from a defensive point of view. But I don't know. I think, like I say, with Inter, the way they've gone off the boil with 3 straight defeats against Bologna, Milan, and Roma, they've got a very kind of small squad comparatively, and have that's shown in the latter stages of this competition in the way they've been trying to juggle multiple competitions. So I think for me it would be one of the other three, and I think Barca are appropriate favourites because they most definitely have the easier semi-final.
Okay, well, let's look at the top goal scorer odds now, with Serhou Guirassy at the top with 13 goals to his name and currently 6-5 to claim the top goal scorer award. But Rafinha, 10-11, just one goal behind him, the Barcelona man, with Robert Lewandowski on 11 at 11-2. But of course, the Polish international set to miss both legs of the semi-final against Inter Milan. Lautaro Martinez of Inter has 8 goals to his name and is 25-1. And then you're looking at Ousmane Dembele as big as 40-1 with 7 goals to his name. Milt, if you were looking at the betting in terms of value here, would you be tempted into somebody?
It's a tricky betting heat, really. I mean, I think the only one you'd be looking at is Rafinha, one behind, but obviously potentially got 3 more games to go with Serhou Guirassy, whose hat-trick took him to the top of the scoring charts, hat-trick against Barcelona in the quarterfinals. But he's out of the running now, and Rafinha looks like he can land the golden boot, particularly with Lewandowski ruled out. I think the others, Martinez has been in excellent form. I think he's scored in his last 5 Champions League games. But you're looking at him to score two goals, a hat-trick against Barcelona in this tie, and for Inter to get through. So I think there's too big a gap, and it looks, Rafinha score a couple of goals in potentially 3 more games. I think probably 10-11 is a fair price about him.
Would you agree with that, Liam? And would you also agree that Lewandowski's absence could be an important factor for Barcelona?
Yeah, I'd echo exactly what Milt said. I think we pretty much had the same notes there, because I think for Rafinha is the only one you might maybe make a case for, but I can't say it's a market I'd want to be getting involved with at this stage of the competition. Maybe if you fancy Lewandowski to bag a hat-trick in a final if he's fit and Barca make it through. But otherwise, I think, it's quite obviously, it's not an ideal market. And the Lewandowski absence obviously is isn't ideal for Barca, but of all the teams that you could maybe take their kind of leading man out of, I think, they've got so many goals across that front line, Lamine Yamal and especially Rafinha in the Champions League this season. I mean, both of them have been obviously in the goals, so I don't think it will hurt them too much.
Okay, well, that's the outright and top goal scorer odds. Next up, it's the best bets for the 2 semi-final first legs.
Do you want football free bets? All the best offers from your favourite bookmakers can be found in one place. Check out racingpost.com/free-bets to find out more. Racing Post, stay ahead of the field.
Well, we'll start off, of course, in chronological order on Tuesday evening with a big game at the Emirates where Arsenal prepare to take on Paris Saint-Germain. In terms of the prices, Arsenal 23-20 to claim the victory. It's 5-2 PSG and 23-10 the draw. Milton, we'll start with you with this one. Arsenal unbeaten in the Champions League at the Emirates since March 2017. I know they've had a bit of time out of the Champions League in between that time as well, but certainly a home form could well be crucial in their hopes here of making the final.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Emirates has been a European fortress for Arsenal over the past 2 seasons in the Champions League. They won 9 of their 11 games to 0. And the 2 exceptions were a 2-2 draw against Bayern Munich in last season's quarterfinals and a draw with PSV this season when they won the away leg 7-1 and rested plenty of star players. And so convincing against Real Madrid in that first leg. Obviously they needed a couple of stunning free kicks from Declan Rice and a great goal from Marino to get past Thibaut Courtois, but they created so many chances. And I just feel the midfield battle was absolutely key in that game against Real. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to dominate to anywhere near that extent against PSG, particularly with Thomas Partey injured. Marino, I think, is a fitness doubt. Might have to move Rice into a more defensive role, which kind of reduces Arsenal's attacking thrust. And you just look at that PSV side; they're so settled. Had a lovely build up to this tie, having they clinched the league about 3 weeks ago. And that midfield 3 of Fabian Ruiz, Vitinha, and João Neves just looks very, very strong to me.
And talking about recent performances between these 2 teams, Liam, obviously they faced off each other in the league. I was going to say the group stage, but of course the league format now. Of course, when the Gunners won 2-1 back in October. I don't suppose we can probably learn too much from that, can we? Because Arsenal have got players missing who were featuring then, and PSG are just a completely different team in different form now.
Yeah, I think it's in some ways it's night and day compared to how PSG were playing at the start of the season to how they performed since then. But ultimately, it's going to have some kind of mental element to it, and I think Arsenal will definitely be buoyed by that win because they know they've beaten this opposition already this season at the Emirates, regardless of how different they've been since then. And I don't know. I think from a experience point of view, I do have some concerns over this Paris Saint-Germain side in kind of these latter stages compared to Arsenal.
Mills, do you think there's any less of an impact in terms of having the second leg at home now that we haven't got the away goal rule? Is that quite as important still?
I think so, yeah. I mean, having said that, bookmakers obviously still rate home advantage as a big factor. Arsenal are clear favourites to win against PSG at the Emirates, but outsiders to qualify. And that was the same against Real Madrid. They were well fancied to win the home leg, but 6-4 to qualify. I think they were about 4-1 to win at the Bernabeu, which obviously they did late on. But having said that, both of these teams have produced some superb away performances in Europe this season. Arsenal thrashed PSV 7-1 when they were really struggling for goals in the Premier League, and then obviously went and closed out the tie really impressively against Real and PSG, as we saw in the last 16. Overturning a 1-0 deficit at Liverpool at Anfield, when everyone thought that Liverpool had nicked a crucial advantage in the first leg, and PSV were worthy winners there. Even though it went to penalties, they really did deserve to go through there.
I mean, Mills mentions worthy winners, Liam. I mean, the fact that they've seen off 2 Premier League teams already, this is their 3rd trip to England, suggests that PSG would be worthy winners if they went all the way.
Yeah, I mean, potentially beating 3 Premier League opponents en route would be a massive achievement. I think you do just have to look at those kind of the nature of those performances. Of course, with the Liverpool game, the first leg. I mean, how on earth how on earth Liverpool obviously got the win in that game, I do not know. And but then the second leg, I think there was arguments that it was kind of a bit of a flip. So I think, yeah, there were big results, but and then obviously with Aston Villa, they could have scored a lot more at the Parc des Princes in the first leg. Second leg, obviously there was a little bit of complacency that set in, and obviously they went on to lose that. So whilst they're incredible results on paper, there's still elements of the Paris Saint-Germain performances that would make me a little bit uneasy about maybe backing them at this stage.
Okay, well, we'll get the best bets now of the guys, starting with you, James, in terms of what you fancy for this clash, the first leg between Arsenal and PSG.
Yeah, I've got a couple of bets in this one. As I mentioned, the midfield battle, I'm going for PSG, draw no bet. I just think Arsenal, they've achieved so much over the past 3 seasons under Arteta, but that's still, when they're missing a key player, and Thomas Partey is a key player for them this season, they can struggle. It doesn't take much for their levels to drop a bit. And I think that midfield battle will be crucial, and I'm not quite sure they're going to be able to dominate as they did against Real. You mentioned PSG's knocking out Liverpool and Villa. They also beat Manchester City in the league phase 4-2, absolutely hammered them, admittedly at home. I think PSG will be really up for this trip, and I think they can improve on their league phase result at the Emirates. The other bet I like is Achraf Hakimi to have 2 or more shots. You look at the way PSG defended a 3-1 first leg lead at Villa Park. Some teams will look to sit on that. Both PSG fullbacks scored in the first half hour of the second leg, and Hakimi got the first one. That was his second goal in the Champions League. He's also had a couple disallowed for tight offsides, and he's had at least 2 shots in all 6 of PSG's Champions League games against English clubs this season, including the league phase defeat at Arsenal.
This looks like it's probably, in my thoughts, Liam, a must-win for Arsenal to be able to take an advantage of the second leg.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, we saw how it changed the dynamic of the tie. Obviously, the winning, not only winning the first leg against Real Madrid, but winning it pretty comfortably in the end. And I think that will be the message from Arteta. They have to go and attack this game. I mean, PSG have been exceptional in the latter stages of this competition. As we said about the performances against Liverpool and Aston Villa, the results in those games were significant. And whilst I think Luis Enrique has got this group to gel and to be so cohesive in the second half of the season, I think people are drawing conclusions from what is quite a small sample size, really, of Paris Saint-Germain performances when we're looking across those 2 knockout ties. The league phase, they were absolutely so incredibly underwhelming with 4 wins, 1 draw and 3 defeats. And of course, you can say that they are a different team to what they were then, but it's still got to be factored in. And while the likes of, Desiree Doué, Bradley Barcola, Joao Neves, William Pacho, very good young technical players with a bright future, they don't have the experience of playing in these kinds of games. They don't have the experience of these big fixtures. If you look at the kind of opponents they're playing week in, week out in Ligue 1, there is that you've got to factor that in. Whereas Arsenal, of course, pretty much have their A game every single week in the Premier League. And I know that might be a bit of a lazy argument, but I do think it's something really significant when you're talking about Paris Saint-Germain. Probably part of the reason that they faltered so much in past seasons in the latter stages. And they did show real complacency in that second leg against Aston Villa. They switched off. And I think that's something that they, could be a little bit guilty of because of the nature of what they're playing week in, week out. Obviously, recently they drew with Nantes, they lost to Nice, and again, the league title was wrapped up, but there was the opportunity to go unbeaten in the season, so there was certainly reason to fight in those games. I think the other big factor is the goals have really dried up for Ousmane Dembele recently, not being as prolific as he was obviously in those first couple of months of the season, of the year. And Arsenal have just been so good at the Emirates in the Champions League season. 5 wins in their 6 home games, 5 clean sheets as well, very solid at the back. There were concerns about Jakub Kiwior coming in for Gabriel, but he did so well across those 2 legs against Real Madrid. Appreciate the argument, obviously, about Thomas Partey. Definitely something to consider, but hopefully, if there's a possibility Mikel Merino is available, it depends obviously how he's his condition. But if he's available, I think if he slots in there and you play Trossard through the middle with Martinelli and Saka either side, I still think Arsenal got a very, very good chance. So in terms of a bet, I think at 3-1 Arsenal to win by 1 goal is a really good approach, because I think if Arsenal do win this game, it's not going to be like that Real Madrid first leg where they're necessarily going to blow PSG out of the water, but I definitely think they can get over the line. I think they've got the capacity to win this. So yeah, Arsenal to win by a single goal, 3-1 is the bet for me.
It's definitely a fascinating tie. The first leg then between Arsenal and PSG at the Emirates, an 8 o'clock kickoff on Tuesday. And then we have to wait 24 hours later for the second semi-final first leg as Barcelona prepare to take on Inter Milan. Barca 3-5 to claim the victory, as big as 4-1 Inter Milan, and the draw 16-5. Liam, we'll start with you with this one. 3-3 when the two teams last met. You have to go back a couple of years for that, but potential for another goal-scoring feast this time round when you consider Barca's attacking threat and the likes of Lautaro Martinez and Thuram for Inter Milan as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case of, what as they say, unstoppable force versus a movable object. It's definitely a case of that swashbuckling Barcelona attack against an Inter team who've defended very, very well in the Champions League this season. Not entirely sure about the situation with Marcus Thuram at the moment, because obviously he has had a bit of an issue recently and been sidelined, which I think is something that's going to potentially hinder Inter as well. Of course, they've got Lautaro Martinez, who's a very good player as well. But I think, of the two semi-finals, this is most definitely the more straightforward to call, I think.
Well, very much Liam in the Barcelona camp, I'd suggest, Milt. But in terms of, if you're looking for Inter Milan maybe to pull off a surprise here, how much of an impact does the game not being at the Nou Camp have? Because obviously having that intimidating atmosphere has been something which has been huge for Barcelona in previous European campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to be coping pretty well. Obviously, this is, almost 2 seasons they've been away from Camp Nou. So they've had plenty of time to get used to it. They've had 3 straight home defeats in La Liga just before Christmas. Since then, they've won 8 and drawn 1, scored 27 goals in those 9 games. And just looking at their last home game, actually, they had 40 shots to Mallorca's 4 in a 1-0 La Liga victory. So I don't think it will be too much of an influence on the tie. I mean, even looking at their Champions League results, they thrashed Bayern Munich 4-1 in the league phase, and obviously beat Borussia Dortmund 4-0 in the quarterfinals. So no, I can't see. I think Inter may be clutching at straws if they're looking at that angle, really.
They have gone under the radar, Inter Milan, a little bit. They've lost just 1 of 12 Champions League games this season, but as we touched upon earlier, Liam, their form in the league will be a bit of a concern going into this.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you look at the state of their squad, it was kind of inevitable there was going to be this drop-off at this stage of the season. I was looking, and interestingly, they've used just 25 players in Serie A this season, which is the fewest in the division. And obviously, when you're a team that are going deep in the Coppa Italia, Serie A, and the Champions League, that squad is going to be stretched. That squad is going to be put to the test. And I think that is really starting to show now, because I just think that it's an aging group as well. I don't know what the average age of this squad is off the top of my head, but it's quite an old squad. And like I say, with a lack of depth there, it's certainly catching up to them. So whilst their performances have been good, they've got some really good results. I just think they're running out of steam at the wrong time of the season.
Mills, do you think there's an argument to be made that both of these two teams will feel they've got a really big chance in the final, whoever goes through, bearing in mind that they're up against teams who have never won the tournament before?
I think so, yeah. I mean, the European pedigree of these teams are obviously superior to Arsenal's and PSG's. I'm not sure. I mean, I think, the strength of the Premier League and obviously the talent in that PSG squad means that they're certainly not going to be taken lightly, whoever gets through that tie. And as Liam mentioned, I think Inter's record probably this season in the Champions League is a little bit flattering. I'm not sure how relevant it is, keeping clean sheets against Sparta Prague and Young Boys and Red Star Belgrade when you're going in to face Barcelona or PSG or even Arsenal. And I mean, they drew 0-0 at Manchester City on match day 1. City obviously went on to have a shocking start to the season, and they beat Arsenal 1-0 at home as well. But the Gunners were missing Martin Odegaard and Declan Rice for that game. So I think Inter have had quite a soft run through to this stage. Feyenoord in the last 16 was a really nice draw, and they rode their luck a little bit against Bayern. Harry Kane hitting the post with that great chance at 0-0 in the first leg. So I'm not sure Inter, even if they do get past Barca, can be taking anyone lightly, really.
Well, having said all that, we'll have a look at the best bets from both guys now. Liam, we'll start with you. What's your suggestion for this second semi-final?
Yeah, I'm going to go for Barcelona to win and under 3.5 goals. I think it's quite a nice price, around sort of 17 to 10 mark. Obviously, we've spoken about Inter and how they've kind of gone off the boil. Obviously, that 3-0 defeat to Milan in the second leg of the Coppa Italia semi-finals would have really hurt. Either side of that lost to Bologna and Roma, meaning they're winless in their last 4 games. Remember, this is an Inter team who have been, pushing for the Serie A title this season. So really concerning from them. Obviously, I touched on the fact that Marcus Thuram's been out recently. Major blow, given I think he's as important, arguably, as Lautaro Martinez in that attack. As for Barcelona, I mean, they've got the unfathomable quadruple potentially on the cards this season, having won the Spanish Super Cup and the Copa del Rey, lead the way in La Liga, and obviously are favourites in this competition. I'm actually thinking the quadruple's looking more like a potentially even a probability rather than a possibility at this stage because they're in such a strong position. Obviously, Lewandowski being out is a blow, but Rafinha and Lamine Yamal are so good, scored 16 goals between them in the Champions League this season. They also have goals from midfield, Dani Olmo, etc. as well. Barca unbeaten in 14 home games. They look right at home at the Estadio Luis Companys as well. And as we said, Inter, of course, racked up 8 clean sheets in this Champions League season, but as Milt said, the kind of players, the teams that they've been coming across, it does skew that statistic slightly. That said, I think Inter will definitely keep it much tighter than Dortmund did in the away leg. So I think Barca to win under 3.5 is the way to go. If you are after a player bet in this game, I actually think Rafinha to score first at 6-1. It's pretty appealing, given this is probably going to be quite a low-scoring game. I say that it could be going to be a 5-2 to Barca now, but based on past history and with Inter, I think it could be a low-scoring match. And Rafinha scored 12 times in the Champions League already this season. No Lewandowski. It's going to be a little bit more pressure on his shoulders. So yeah, I think it'll be a low-scoring win for Barca.
James, I think you are in agreement that this is Barca's to win.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Lewandowski has had a phenomenal season considering his age, 36 goals in 41 starts in the league and the Champions League. But as Liam mentioned earlier in the show, Barca have got so many attacking options. And I just think, talking about that aging Inter squad, Barca have got these young, pacey, slick players who are really coming into top form. And I like the look of a 3-1 Barcelona win, actually, at a nice price in the correct score market. Rafinha and Lamine, absolutely terrific all season. Pedri looks back to his best in midfield. And they have that Copa del Rey final victory over Real Madrid at the weekend as well. Usually going to extra time might be considered a negative, but I think, the adrenaline, the emotion of that victory can only spur them on. And then Inter played Roma the following day. Just looking at the stats from that game, Roma had 30% possession, had 7 shots on target to Inter's 2. And I think that kind of sums up where Inter are at the moment. Thuram, if he misses out, is a huge blow. Benjamin Pavard, key defender, was injured as well. And I think Barca probably know they have the beating of Inter in an open game, and I expect them to go for it. So yeah, 3-1 Barcelona win for me.
Okay, well, double backing of Barcelona in the second semi-final. Just a reminder, that is on Wednesday night with an 8 o'clock kickoff UK time. Well, that's all from us. Thanks very much to both James and Liam for their input. Don't forget, of course, to like, subscribe and comment on the Racing Post YouTube channel. And if you like your golf, don't miss the Sweet Spot with Steve Palmer every Tuesday. Steve and Dave Clark will be back again this week. Looking forward to events on both the PGA Tour and the Live Tour. We'll be back on Thursday to preview the Premier League and EFL weekend action. But until then, enjoy your midweek European football and please remember to gamble responsibly.